Chapter 2. Not even Bill and Ted's biggest fans would say that at this stage of their development, they were the most gifted musicians in the world. The Wild Stallions were still growing musically, and that was a kind way of putting things. And even Bill and Ted knew that there was room for improvement. Joanne and Elizabeth were on drums and keyboards, and they were pretty good. Music was a big babe thing in the 15th century, and Bill and Ted had taken a few lessons, so things were looking up. Still, as musicians, they remained on the wrong side of triumphant. Bill knew it, Ted knew it, the girls knew it, and unfortunately, Mrs. Wardrow, a major power in the San Dimas music scene, was about to find out about it too. She was auditioning Wild Stallions for a battle of the bands she was putting together, and Bill and Ted were desperate to make the cut. They were not doing well, but Rihanna Wardrow was determined to hear them to the end, which was pretty excellent of her considering. When they finished their set, Bill leaped to the microphone and managed to make himself heard over the feedback that wailed through the auditorium. "Thank you! Hope we did okay for this audition. I'm Bill S. Preston, Esquire. This is Ted Theodore Logan." Ted did a little lame riff on his guitar and spoke into the mic. "And on drums and keyboards, celebrating their 5th year in this century, are the beautiful princesses from medieval England, Joanna and Elizabeth. And we are Wild Stallions." The 4 musicians stared hopefully at Mrs. Wardrow. She stared back. Then Bill realized something was missing. "Ted," he stage whispered, "close the show, dude." Ted slapped his forehead. "Finally, in closing, we just wanted to say, He had worked out a speech beforehand, but he couldn't remember it. "Okay, a lot of times you feel... He looked panic-stricken to Bill. "Dude, take it." Bill was no better prepared. "Okay, well, like you said, love is nice." There was silence, and the stage lights snapped off abruptly. Then, from the back of the auditorium, Mrs. Wardrow started clapping, slowly. Bill and Ted suspected she might not have been sincere, but they made the best of the applause. "Well," Ted whispered, "at least she's not booing us." Mrs. Wardrow walked down to the front of the theater and stood with her arms folded across her considerable chest, appraising the Wild Stallions with a critical eye. "Okay, first off, your closing speech? It's the lamest thing I've ever heard." They couldn't really argue with that. "Yeah," said Ted. "We know. We totally didn't know what to say." Mrs. Wardrow shook her head. "I mean, you guys keep telling me you're going to be the greatest band in the world, but you stink." "We've noticed that ourselves," said Ted. "Yeah," said Bill. "We don't understand it either." "You can't sing," said Mrs. Wardrow. "I mean, the girls, they can play, but you guys..." She threw up her hands. "Well," said Bill, "you know girls mature faster than boys. It's a scientific fact." "Yeah, plus they started playing in the 15th century. That's kind of a head start." Mrs. Wardrow shook her head, as if clearing her brain. "What does that mean? The 15th century?" Ted stepped forward and began explaining earnestly. "See, Mrs. Wardrow, Elizabeth and Joanna are princesses from medieval England, and..." "Ted," said Bill, "I'm sure Mrs. Wardrow isn't interested in hearing about..." "Oh, yeah, right." Ted thought a moment, then his face brightened. "Medieval England, Iowa. They're from medieval England, Iowa." "And they're princesses to us," said Bill. "Yeah." "Look," said Mrs. Wardrow quickly, "it doesn't matter. Guys, the point is, the Battle of the Bands is the biggest event for new groups in the area. We're talking about a $25,000 first prize." "Whoa," said Bill and Ted. "And a 2-year record deal. A chance to be seen by some of the most important people in the business. We even got live coverage on Channel 12. "Whoa," said Bill and Ted. They beamed. Fame and fortune seemed to finally be within their grasp. Now, if you guys were me, would you put you guys on? Bill and Ted came back to reality with a sickening thud. "No way," said Bill. "No way," Ted agreed. "You see my problem?" said Mrs. Wardrow. She paused a moment, then shook her head. "However, for some reason, I have faith in you two, so I'm going to give you a shot." "Excellent. But, she added quickly, you're going on last. Midnight. By that time, everybody should have left. That's okay, said Ted. We're used to it. Yeah, we fully cleaned out Ted's little brother's junior high school dance. They totally turned on La Bamba while Bill was playing his solo. Tough crowd. Shut up, Ted. Well, they did. I said shut up, Ted. Mrs. Wardrow cut in and looked them squarely in the eyes. She seemed to be genuinely concerned about them and anxious to help them launch their careers, or, at the very least, have them avoid outright humiliation. Guys, do yourself a favor. Prepare a little. Work on your act. Don't embarrass yourselves too badly, huh? I mean, you're going to be on TV. It's only local, but you can still make fools of yourself in front of the whole city. Thanks, Mrs. Wardrow, said Bill. We will let you down. I hope you don't. Now get out of here. I've got 5 more bands to audition. In addition to being non-triumphant musicians, Bill and Ted were now men of the world. They had jobs, minimum wage at a fast food joint called Pretzels and Cheese, an apartment of their own, and Bill was the proud owner of a van, a 1985 Ford Ecoline van, complete with a hand-painted Wild Stallions logo on their side. The van came in handy transporting their equipment to gigs, and the princesses made excellent roadies. While they loaded, Bill and Ted were deep in conversation. Bill had been doing some thinking, and he had come to a conclusion. Dude, he announced, we gotta win that contest. Yeah, said Ted, watching Elizabeth struggling with an amp. If we win that concert, then we can finally propose to the princesses and get some roadies. I know. There's no way we could raise a family on the money we make at Pretzels and Cheese. Yeah, paying for the princess's birthday party was hard enough. Quiet, cautioned Bill. They'll hear you. The birthday party for Joanna and Elizabeth was a most resplendent occasion, considering the state of Bill and Ted's apartment and finances. A banner stretched across the sparsely furnished living room. Happy 521st birthday, Joanna and Elizabeth. And a big picture of the 2 pretty girls occupied a place of honor among photos of Bill and Ted's other historical friends, like Napoleon, Socrates, Beethoven, and the nice once you get to know him dude, Genghis Khan. The rest of the decoration in the apartment reflected, as you might imagine, Bill and Ted's interest in hard rock. Much wall space was devoted to huge posters of their favorite bands, like Aerosmith, Faith No More, and Guns N' Roses. What did look out of place in the apartment was all the books, most of them devoted to historical subjects. Bill and Ted quite took to history once they started visiting it on a regular basis, and they also wanted to understand what Joanna and Elizabeth were talking about. You see, although they had been in the modern world for 5 years and were completely today kind of babes, Elizabeth and Joanna did have the disconcerting habit of occasionally slipping into medieval speak, rude screens and snood caps and boon work and stuff like that. So it was handy to have a book or two around to try to figure out what they were talking about. Missy, who had the distinction of having been at high school with both Bill and Ted and been married to both their fathers, right now she was married to Ted's dad, Captain Logan, had put most of the party together. Neither Bill nor Ted could quite figure her out. Never mind that she was only a year or 2 older than both of them, and was totally a resplendent babe into the bargain. The fact that she had been stepmother to both of them was, to put it mildly, a little confusing. Captain Logan wasn't confused by his pretty young wife. He was totally in love with her, and went around all day with this, "How could this have happened to a toad like me?" look on his face. He could barely take his eyes off of her long enough to wish Elizabeth and Joanna a happy birthday and to offer grudging congratulations to his son. "So, I understand you two have a little something else to celebrate tonight." Captain Logan's eyes traveled across the room to his wife. "We got into the Battle of the Bands," said Elizabeth, Ted's babe. She spoke in a soft English accent. "Yeah," said Ted. "If we win, I could pay you back some of the money I owe you." Captain Logan did not look impressed. It was hard to impress a cop at any time. It was even harder if you were Ted, his son, and you were trying to impress your father, the police captain, with promises of success with a band he couldn't stand to even hear about, never mind listen to. And what if you don't win? Then what? Ted thought for a moment. "Well, I guess. Maybe we'll have to go back to full-time at Pretzels and Cheese. Maybe sell some more blood. Maybe you should think about selling a couple of instruments." "But then what will we play in the band, Dad? You can't have a band without instruments." Ted, your band is never going to amount to a hill of beans, and neither will you if you don't get some kind of responsible job. Job, said Ted with a shudder. You could always come to us, Ted. A voice boomed behind him. Ted turned. His eyes widened, and he gulped. The man was dressed in the uniform of a full colonel in the army. Above the left breast pocket of his tunic was a nameplate. It read, Oates. Ted had once come dangerously close to being packed off to Colonel Oates' military academy in Alaska. He had managed to avert such a dreadful fate, and although Oates seemed bluff and hearty, friendly even, Ted didn't trust him. How's it going, sir? Splendidly. Remember, it's not too late for you, or any of you. He winked broadly at Elizabeth. Plenty of career opportunities in the military for the, weaker sex. He winked again and then pulled Bill and Joanna into the circle. How about you two? Well, we have other plans, Colonel. A band, said Captain Logan derisively. A brass band? Plenty of those in the service, son. We're a little more interested in rock, said Bill. Heavy metal. Plenty of that, too. We call it armor. Hi, Oatesy, said Missy, coming up to the little group. She carried a plate in her hand. Fudge? Love some, said Oates. Bill tried real hard to sort out a tangled skein of marriages and divorces in an attempt to get his exact relationship to Missy correct. He failed. How's it going, Missy? I mean, Mom? No, wait. It didn't much matter, as Missy wasn't paying attention. Captain Logan had pulled his wife into a bear hug, and they were kissing deep and long, oblivious to the stares of Elizabeth, Joanne, Bill, and Ted. I can't believe Missy divorced your dad and married mine, Ted whispered. Bill shook his head in disbelief. I know. What's next? Maybe you, said Elizabeth, teasing. Yeah, then you'll be your own stepdad. You could use the car whenever you wanted. That would be most unrivaled, Joanna observed. Missy managed to pull herself free of Ted's dad, gulped for air, and turned to the two princesses. She took a book from her bag and handed it to Elizabeth. I got this for you. I hope you like it. Elizabeth read the title on the cover. Past Lives, Past Lessons. What does that mean? Missy looked very serious. You know, I believe what you say about having lived in medieval England. Missy lowered her voice. You see, I understand all about past lives. I used to be Ty Cobb. But you're not anymore, said Captain Logan, enfolding her in another squeeze, followed by a kiss. There was something about all this that struck Bill and Ted as totally bogus. By the time the party was over, and everybody except Joanna and Elizabeth had left, Bill and Ted knew that this was going to be a very important night. Nervously, Ted swallowed hard. I hope you liked your party. It was lovely, said Elizabeth. Resplendent, agreed Joanne. But you've probably noticed we haven't given you your gifts yet, said Ted. That's because, well, what we wanted to say. Bill faltered, and he looked panic-stricken to Ted. Actions speak louder than words, dude, Ted said. With that, they both dropped to one knee in front of their respective princesses. They produced pieces of paper. I wrote this myself, said Bill. And I wrote mine, said Ted, last night. Bill cleared his throat. Joanna, as I wander through the dark and lonely forest of life, surrounded by various beasts like bears, vipers, squirrels, not to mention small, tree-growing lichen, woodpeckers, tree rats, toads, slugs, Gila monsters. Oh, no, that's the desert, not the dark forest of life. His pretty speech grounded to a halt, but Joanna continued to smile pleasantly, even though she was a bit mystified. Ted took up the slack. Elizabeth, as I swim through this dark and fearful sea of existence, surrounded by various creatures, sharks, eels, mahi-mahi, yellowtail, not to mention tiny barnacles and plankton, man-o'-wars, starfish, blowfish, catfish. Oh, no, that's freshwater. Joanna and Elizabeth were beginning to suspect that there had been a degree of collusion in the writing of these speeches. But the point is, said Bill earnestly, I know we promised you a better life than this. Although stuff hasn't exactly worked out in the way we thought, it will. I mean, I'm sure that, you see, yeah, said Ted. I realized that when we took you out of England, We said the future held some really good stuff. It will. I mean, I'm sure that... You see... We hope, said Bill. Oh, we hope, said Ted. What are you boys trying to say? Bill took a deep breath. What this is about is... The day after tomorrow, said Ted. If things work out triumphantly. In unison, they said, Will you marry us? Both girls burst into delighted smiles. Joanna took Bill's hand in hers. I would love to, Bill. Elizabeth kissed Ted. I would be honored. Bill and Ted looked at each other, not quite able to believe that this was actually happening to them. There was only one response, a long, wild air guitar riff, and the lyrics were obvious. Things couldn't be going much better. Except, Elizabeth and Joanna were very old-fashioned girls, and engaged or not, they would not stay the night with their husbands-to-be. Bill and Ted watched them from the balcony as the girls drove off in their little convertible Volkswagen. The princesses had better jobs than Bill and Ted, and consequently, more money. Bill had a thought. Dude. What? Maybe after we're married, the princesses will stay over with us. Yeah, our girlfriends are most chaste. Bill was inclined to be philosophical. Could be worse, though. Yeah, how's that? They could be dating our dads. Good point, dude. Good point. Just then, the phone began to ring. Bill answered it. He shouldn't have.